Good morning, everyone. How are you all? How is your day going? I hope you're all doing great. Thank you so much for coming today. We have an amazing group of panelists with us today. We're today discussing public-private partnership for sustainable prosperity. I will start the panel by thanking you all for coming and joining. And I will like to let every one of you to introduce yourself first. Maybe take a minute to talk about yourself and also to tell me, how is your Davos?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited that it's snowing outside. It finally feels right. I'm Aurora. I'm the head of strategy and transformation for Actual, and we are like redefining project finance by using like AI to bring together like finance, science, math, and environmental and the social impact that amazing and ambitious projects have in the world. And by doing so, we de-risk like investments and help entrepreneurs and organizations to really push forward with a green economy that we're all hoping to see. My Davos is going well. I would like to steal the definition of what this week has been like from the president of the WTO. She said that Davos is just like childbirth. You have to go through it, whether you want it or not, and it's painful. So it has been like an amazing week. I really love all the energy and AI conversations that we are seeing. And I remember last year it was all about OpenAI and what like ChatGPT was going to be about. People were worried about like AI like for stealing jobs. And this year it's all about AI and purpose. So if you want to talk about sustainability and profitability and AI, I'm here.
Hi, everybody. First and foremost, I am so happy to be here. I am Jacquelyn Omotalade. I am based out of Washington, D.C., sometimes, and I am with Pixera Global. And my work focuses a lot on equity in climate investments, particularly looking at new financial models of which community ownership is a part of, community partnership, and just really ensuring that projects, as we transition to this green economy, really are community-centered and community-focused. At the same time, making sure that profits aren't impacted. And how's my Davos going? My Davos is going fabulously. I enjoy Davos very much. I enjoy the relationships. I enjoy the conversations. I enjoy the thought leadership. And I look forward to having conversations both here and elsewhere in the globe.
Thank you, Jackie.
So my name is Tommy Baltzis. I'm the CEO of WhiteHaven Asset Management, an investment firm based out of Montreal, Canada. Basically what we do is we manage wealth management, asset allocation for managed accounts. We don't really specialize in anything. Basically we just look at what our clients' needs are and we seek investment opportunities for them. We have our own public market traditional assets funds, and we also do a bit of alternative investments where we focus really on the entrepreneurs, basically trying to find opportunities for our clients with individuals that we believe are crazy enough to believe that they could change the world. So that's what we focus on. My firm's in Canada. We're looking at some expansion in the future. So for those that will follow us in the future, you'll see that we're expanding into Saudi Arabia as well too. My Davos, this is my second Davos. I don't know about the childbearing. I can't tell you about that part of it, but it's you meet a lot of interesting people. It's been great. This house, by the way, is one of the nicest ones. So good job, good job. There you go.
It's a fantastic house.
The only bad part I've had in Davos so far is everybody asks me about Canadian politics. I really don't want to hear about it. But it's been great meeting a lot of interesting people around the world. Just networking. That's what it's all about. And the one thing, running an investment firm, you get to research a lot. We're more fundamental. So I get pulled into different events and they challenge my knowledge. Sometimes I'm like, I can't wait for this neuroscience to come in, put a chip in my head to be able to talk about a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's been a great experience. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you all. It's really diverse kind of perspective about Davos. So are you guys excited to talk about public-private partnership for sustainable?
Oh, yeah, I didn't sleep all night.
Very good. I'll start with Aurora. Your work is basically to integrate AI to figure out how to allocate capital for sustainable development, investment, growth. How can you teach us to leverage such technologies that you're using to streamline the decision making and prioritize an impactful public-private partnership projects?
Thank you, Basima. I would like to share a great example from a couple of years ago. The Giga project under UNICEF approached us asking to help them to bring internet to 2 million schools in 40 countries. And the Giga project is known for being like a non-profit organization, so there were no money expected to be made out of this. So we use our platform to crunch together the energy sector, the connectivity sector, and help UNICEF identify where the schools are and how to bring infrastructure there. Now, our platform uses like AI to look like at numbers and like the value that can be unlocked, but it's also like a multi-stakeholder platform, which means that we were able to connect people sitting in New York with the local presidents and with the local mayors and with the teachers. And all these people had access exactly to the same plan, and they were able to contribute with their own data, which for me was an amazing example. I'm originally Italian. I moved to the US 20 years ago, and I lived in Ghana for like 4 years. So I've seen a lot of like development work, and what usually like breaks my heart is that the most fragile communities are not benefiting and do not have access of the same tools that decision makers have. And so we were able to use like AI to bring everyone around the same table, whether they had a high educational degree or not. And as a result of this like fully integrated plan, we identified value, social value and financial value that turned this project from a non-profit project into a profitable project. And so to me, public and private partnerships at all levels and globally are the key to succeed. We often hear about collaboration, and this is exactly what collaboration is about. And we have this amazing like AI that can digest high level of complexity and making it accessible to everyone. So I'm absolutely pro partnership. I'm very excited.
Thank you so much, Aurora. I remember a couple of years ago, we were in one of the GCC countries' investment meetings, and we were talking about our in-house software for control and management of solar energy assets. We were trying to pitch it to investors, and they were like, do you have AI in it? And we're like, no. It's like, we can invest in anything has an AI in it. When you figure that out, come back to us. So I went back to my team. I was like, how can we integrate AI? They were like, we can actually use weather forecasting to optimize energy storage for cloudy days. And I was like, let's do it. This is where the money is going. But actually, if you think about it, it just makes a lot of sense, you know? Like, you don't need to put so much time and effort to do something that can be done so quickly and efficiently through AI. Jackie, you have this extensive background in equitable climate finance. I want you to also tell us a little bit about your experience and in terms of how you ensure environmental justice for locals, for communities, while addressing the countries or the region needs to develop, in terms of like across different sectors. How can we be more environmentally responsible and also ensure we have this environmental justice to all, not just to specific groups?
So and I want to kind of piggyback on the AI conversation as well, because part of my doctoral research was some very interesting on like a micro level in terms of schools, particularly public schools, which are community assets, right? And one of the things that I worked on is microgrids, as well as like renewable energy using AI. And the interesting thing was, because it was a public-private partnership, public schools, private sector as well, in terms of the renewable energies, there was this idea of like, well, Jackie, we don't have like a power purchase agreement, so why would we invest this money into doing these like projects just for schools? This is just a social enterprise. And we were able actually to use AI, one, to show the traffic around the schools, because we were also going to install EV charging stations, and actually be able to put together a whole deal which had microgrids, used AI, were able to power the school with renewable energy, transition the school buses for the school into electric school buses, plus had the EV charging stations, which actually were profitable within like 6 months of operation. And it was this idea of, again, and I liked how you started off when you said you are looking for folks who think they can change the world. I think a lot of it comes from the understanding of community, but then this idea that you can do things differently. And so instead of thinking like, oh, it can't be done because it hasn't been done before, really being open-minded and thinking, how can I work with community? How can I get the numbers to work? How can I use AI? How can I use the technologies that are available to solve a community problem, but also solve a business problem? So I would say that just to kind of answer your question, it is really truly the idea of being like bold, willing to take risk, but then understanding your numbers and your data, understanding your community needs, having conversations with the communities. And the thing about that is that if anything goes even a slightly bit wrong, the community would be the first one to report it. And I've seen that work in projects around the world. In fact, another renewable energy project, and a lot of times people are like, renewable energy is going somewhere else. They're building these panels or these wind in our community, but we don't actually understand where the resources are going. And we've been able to do models where, for example, we're doing solar panels, but we're also, for an extra $1 per kilometer, we're adding water lines. What does that do? It has like it makes community invested in your project. And yes, there are some upfront costs that are added, but the returns in terms of like 5, 10 years, it makes it well worth it, because community sees themselves as part of your project.
It's really interesting to, that you brought up the topic of like the long-term return on investment, which is something that we're really trying to educate our clients and decision makers in terms of like, it's not about today. It's not about it has to happen now and in a cheaper cost. The most important thing is to think long-term. And long-term cannot be that long. 5 years is not long when it comes to return on investment if the alternative is going to be expensive forever. Correct? So thank you so much for bringing this up. Now we will go to come to you, Tommy. You have a lot of experience in wealth management and geopolitics as well, correct? We were discussing this also before the panel. Let's talk a little bit about financing and sustainable development first. How can we be innovative in that? And how can public-private partnership foster the sustainable development while diversifying our investment and bringing investors from different backgrounds to find innovative financing models? Tell me a little bit about this.
So there's a lot to unravel there, and there's a few things that could address as well, but I'm just going to go down a train of thought, and if you want to realign me. So when I speak to politicians or people that are looking at some PPP projects, I always tell people, like everything else, look at history. History tends to repeat itself. So as much as we said that a 5-year investment is not that long, well, I could tell you a lot of projects are for 5 years, and there's cost overruns, and there's permits, and there's this and that, and it ends up being a longer project. And politicians are these days a little more into short term instead of long term. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. But when you're looking at obviously return on investment and money, you need stability, you need predictability, you need to have something certain. The other aspect that I always tell people is, or when we have these kind of discussions, is define sustainable development, right? Because everybody just associates it to ESG, which is part of it, but sustainable development is trying to take care of the people's needs of today without hindering in the future generation, right? So are you making decisions that's gonna build the infrastructure because you need it today, but if the project is long-term, well, unfortunately, demographics and geography play a role into it. So, for example, if you're in a environment where your birth rate is low, and you're building in new communities, well, do you really need to build more schools? If people are having less kids, and so there's a lot of factors that come into play, and unfortunately there's decisions made of thinking of today, but something will go online in somewhere between 5 and 10 years, and then you realize it, and you have sometimes ghost towns, or you have cost overruns, or like I'll just give you an example. In Canada, I'm in the province of Quebec, so it's more the French side. In 2 years, we're going to have more people over 55 than under 55. So what does that mean? It means I'm going to be fighting with my father on who's going to pay taxes, who's going to pay for their benefit. And obviously they want more social benefits because, hey, I've been working to build this country for you, and now you owe me. And then we have our younger population that are like, well, we want to delay having kids. We're getting educated. We're getting more jobs that are remote. Using travel expenses as part of your business, so you're paying less taxes again. So there's major challenges that are coming right now. And yes, there's, obviously AI is a hot topic, and I'm not going to get into that. But when you get into these PPP programs, it's exactly that. And again, and then it's the governments, is that what are they looking for? Are they looking for some private to not only bring in the financing, but are they looking for innovation and strategy? And on the private side, am I just looking for somebody to just give me a permit? So there's a lot that goes into play. And one big aspect is when you get into a project, is the tendering. The offer of putting out tender offers, it takes money. So you're taking the cheapest cost. So there's a lot of play that come in. But at the end of the day, it's really for the private sector is to have that stability, predictability, and getting organizations that are going to back the future. And the biggest mistake I always tell people is they never factor in geography and demographics. If you're importing 75% of your food, well, I always say focus on projects that are going to take care of your basic needs first. If you need electricity, if you need all that, build that infrastructure, and then build up from there. Because I've been in areas where there's no electricity and they're building incubators, and I just roll my eyes. So there's ways of doing certain things. But I'm gearing off a little, but I hope that kind of answered the question.
Actually, it does, and it makes a lot of sense in the context of the Kurdistan region as well. Basic services are to be highly prioritized. Diversifying economy needs to be highly also prioritized, because oil is the main driver for our GDP. So it's risky, and that's why we are having these conversations and we're having these discussions into we cannot just put everything on oil. Not even our power generation has to be just solely and wholly, relying on fossil fuel sources. We're not saying let's leave it behind for sure, but like we need to diversify to have a sustainable future. So thank you so much for bringing this important fact and point. Aurora, again, you have visited Kurdistan.
Yes.
And you liked it a lot. It was during HITEX just a few months ago. You have maybe some perspective about the Kurdistan economy. What would you recommend in terms of what are the innovative avenues for the region, in which direction they could diversify their economy, and where they can capitalize on public-private partnership the most?
Wow, this is a big question. I'll try to answer in the best way I can. So, first of all, I think that we all agree that energy is really like the backbone of like resilience and success of any business out there, because without energy we can't make anything happen. And with a global growing population and increased need of energy from like the tech sector, this is like becoming a problem. Last week in Spain, thousands of people were rallying because they want Spain to keep the nuclear plants open because they are afraid that they're not going to have enough energy. And so I think in your case, you should really double down on your renewable energy sources, starting with solar. And it's not just like about the technological part, because we know that the cost of like solar panel like went down, and it's very easy to generate solar. But it becomes more a business model challenge. How are you going to create an economy, a sustainable economy out of it? How much the government want to play a role, as much as like the private sector, and maybe even like come up with more like creative ways of creating like the next generation of utility company. I'm sure this is something that you're passionate about, and you know what I'm talking. So I would say yes, renewable energy first, and maybe even like beyond solar. But it really comes down to like the business model. How can you even like attract more? You guys have like some amazing numbers about the investments that you have made, but how can you attract even like more international capital and make it like appealing for like investors who see how the entire economy will benefit from it? And the second sector, I would say, is agriculture, which is like one of the key pillars that can help all of you to sustain yourself and to be like independent. So, given like your history, given your geographical location and agriculture and energy, I will be very excited to see how you can write a story where stability, resilience, and peacemaking can be based on environmental assets and how you manage them. Because if you can be as renewable, you can use renewable energy as much as you can, it will really make you stand out in comparison to the regions around you, and the geopolitics will change.
This is a great answer and a great segue to my next question to Jackie. We, in Kurdistan region, we do have, minorities and some communities who have, established their communities in their own areas and territories. And as we are, getting out and we're at the stability phase or destabilization or shifting away from the era of non-settlement and conflict to development and peace building. what are the innovative approaches that how can we build trust first between the government and marginalized communities, right? How can we do this? What have you done elsewhere that has been successful, and when we can bring it as the government is planning and building and developing their public-private partnerships and taking this to across different regions that can also include marginalized communities. So what can you teach us about that? Since this is televised and is going to be, sent, all across, this message would be delivered to decision makers. So what do you teach us?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. First and foremost, I do agree on the renewable energy, like diversifying energy supplies, and then the agriculture, particularly regenerative ag. But I also, when I am thinking about projects, and I'll give you an example of a project that Baxeria Global is doing in northern Nigeria, which from a security perspective is risky, is very risky. But one of the reasons why the project has been so successful and that there actually is an ROI in this regenerative ag is because they're seen as a benefit from the community, right? And they protect it. They protect it from all that is the political instability that is that area and region. We're able to get things in, out, in a very safe manner in ways that even the government itself can't do. And so I say that, yes, trust must be built between the government and marginalized communities, but I also say that the government has to create an environment where investors can actually come in and do some very interesting and dynamic things and also build that trust. Because I think one of the things that connects us all, regardless of where we are politically, where our histories are with our government, is that we all want our families to be happy and healthy. And if we see a pathway to that, we will gravitate toward that. And I think that starts to build trust. That starts to build stability, right? And I think that it starts with some investors who are interested in being very bullish. Because when I started going out and first pitching, I'm doing this regenerative ag project in northern Nigeria, folks were like, yeah, Jackie, so you want me to just burn my money? That's what you're asking me to do? That's it. And I'm like, no, let's start slow, right? Next thing you know, we have 44 villages, right? Started in 10, now in 44, which is pretty much unheard of, right? And we still are obviously bringing in government, but I think also sometimes government gets in the way of business.
Does the local feel that they have there's tension between them and the authorities in the area? Do they try to disrupt the operations or voice their concerns?
Initially, right, because you have an outsider coming in, there is already tension and travel issues and concerns. So yes, initially, but once they also saw that they could exist in the same playbox, the same sandbox, not necessarily be friends, but when they saw the pipeline, and when I say pipeline, I mean literally the regenerative ag pipeline is being beneficial to all of them in different ways. It was pretty easy to have folks say no, this road in and out is being protected. And then it was once folks saw that 6 months in, there were no issues, no kidnappings, no anything, then it was all right, Jack, what's people call me who like me? All right, I'm in for another $5 million. And from that $5 million, then all of a sudden the government is also seeing wow. And then it was all right, let's do 20, let's do 30, let's do 50.
You're a good negotiator.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And so I will say that, do I necessarily think that the folks love government? No, right? That's going to take a lot longer journey. But in terms of the development that is seen being happening there, and the trust that the money will continue to flow and the benefits will continue to flow to both the community and to government, that is absolutely there, and that keeps the partnership working.
Well, this is a great example. Love it. I want to share what our experience in New Zealand has been like. We were approached by the New Zealand government asking us if we could help them to create a plan for net zero wall. And as soon as like the news spread, the farmers were like terrified. They're like, oh my God, what's gonna happen of us? And we empowered the government to create policies that were like very inclusive and mindful of farmers and really like help them to be part of the entire like supply chain. So at the end, we got the farmers that were like happy. They never got like better policies. The government that had like a plan for like net zero wool that eventually get bought by IKEA, Gucci, Loro Piana. So if you look at the entire like value across like this supply chain and the government and the role that the government can play with the right type of policies, it's amazing. And as a result, like with our clients, we usually increase their IRR of at least like 8%. So as she was saying, when you invest in the community and everything like around it, when you take the community in mind and it's like fully integrated into like the bigger plan, money are there, the environment is there, and everyone is happy.
And I'll just add to that a little bit, because I hear what you're saying, and I absolutely believe it. And I will say, just to add to the level of complexity, right, particularly like in northern Nigeria, which is, I mean, there's other places in the regions. You have like the farmers who actually have their farmland, and then you have like the nomadic tribes who have their cattle. And they are constantly in conflict and have historically been in conflict. What we did is brought them both in, because the nomadic cattle ranchers view all land as theirs, and the farmers believe that where they're farming is theirs, right? And created pathways for both of them that to a great degree now, the cattle ranchers leave the farmers' land alone because they see it as symbiotic, right? Like what benefits the farmers also benefit them in terms of where they nomadically are ranching. And that is huge for northern Nigeria in terms of reducing conflict, but also like the ability to generate wealth.
It's actually very similar to like, some of the examples we have with investment projects that took place in our region, that when, the locals have found that, these operations and projects are, there is like some common interest. There's something, their community is also benefiting from all the, I would say the cash that was flowing into the area and the job opportunities. This kind of tension, started going down, and it's always a learning process, right? Especially like with regions who have not been, experiencing the impact of foreign investment on local communities, especially in remote areas, firsthand for a very long time. So it's always a learning process, and there has to be like some new policies and to be integrated into new projects to make sure how this can take place without disrupting the operations in these areas. Tell me, since we're talking about like, marginalized communities, tension, and, diffusing this tension between locals and, newcomers, these are things that, can be controlled to some extent, right? Can be mitigated at least. What about the things and the issues that the region can have no control over? You have experience in geopolitics of the Middle East as a whole, and the geopolitics of Iraq as a nation, and geopolitics of the Kurdistan region as well. What would be, what kind of stand or policies, or what would be the best thing that the government and decision makers in Kurdistan that should take to protect foreign investments in the region, while there are other geopolitical problems taking place that we have no control over, in the surroundings of Kurdistan region, whether within federal Iraq or beyond?
Yeah, like at the end of the day, it's you could only control what you can control. Obviously, Kurdistan and the region is oil rich. You just look at what Saudi Arabia did, MBS, what he's doing to try to diversify its economy away from oil. There's a lot of, I'm trying to see how to phrase this, is that you got to look at what you want to do in the future. I mean, depends on what, everybody just runs into everything. Like AI, like we said, it's a hot topic right now, but, I personally do not believe that we're going to get the breakthrough in AI short term. In the long term, we will. I mean, there's an issue with semiconductors. And, everybody just believes that, everybody's going to do an AI, but if you look at all the semiconductors that are being purchased and, the under 5 nanometer semiconductors that are coming from the quartz, silicon that's coming from one plant, or from one mine in North Carolina, which is the 99.9999, the 9 N's that they say. It's challenging to be able to get that. So yeah, we'll be able to do some AI. So the question is, what does the region want to do? Like, I'll give you an example of I have a Greek background. What Greece has decided to do as a country is they said, listen, we could only control what we can control. So they're making an arrangement for building a natural gas pipeline in the northern part of Greece. This year they started, or was it last year? I don't remember. But recently, they opened up international students, increasing that, and trying to give tax advantages to large corporations. So the idea is saying, listen, over the next generation, we have a declining birth rate. We don't even know where our culture is going to be in the next 25 years. We have youth that's fleeing to other parts of Europe, other parts of the world. So if what do we have? We have good weather. So if we could attract young people to come here and study and have them, once they finish, have jobs here, yeah, and that's the bet they're taking. So they're not going into every single sector. They're going to focus on biotech and a few industries. So it's the same thing like everybody else. I think everybody has to sit down and what are they going to bring on the world stage as bargaining chips and what you can control. In Kurdistan, obviously, you have the oil and gas aspect of it, and if you can get a point to be able to collaborate and stabilize more and more the region, and obviously there's a negotiation, a give and take to get what you want. So you may not get the optimal, but if you get something that's better than what you are currently, and you work in the future, I think when you get places where it's you have a little more instability, I think it's taking baby steps. It's not looking for that long leap to try to make a major change within one generation. So that's what I would say, is that it's really collaborating, focusing on the positives, focusing on the future. As human beings, we tend to always look at the negative and always complain. But I think if you look at that way and say, okay, yes, this is what it is, put history to the side a bit, where we are today, what we can do, where we headed, and work to there, and then with little baby steps, and over time, see where the world's going to take you.
Thank you so much. I think the Kurdistan region is doing really well, considering all, all what's happening in the region by making sure, maintaining peace and protecting investors, projects and interest in the region, and keeping good relationships with neighboring countries and, with also the federal government to ensure for as much as possible, we keep moving forward no matter what's happening, because that's the vision, that's the goal, is to focus on the future and on the development and growing the economy. I'm going to open the floor for some questions from the audience. I'm sure some of you, this conversation has sparked some ideas and questions in your mind. So please raise your hand and I will move the microphone to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing also. I wrote down a question that for anyone that would like to answer it. So it's how can public and private partnerships be leveraged to create more opportunities for young people, particularly in underdeserved communities, to develop their skills and leadership qualities need to drive sustainable prosperity? I don't know if the question is clear.
How can young people, sorry, I didn't, there was a little, how can young people?
I said, how can public and private partnerships be leveraged to create more opportunities for young people, particularly in underdeserved communities, to develop the skills and leadership qualities needed to drive sustainable prosperity?
So if you want, I'll take a first stab at it.
Wonderful.
Youth, you know, the good part of when you're being young is you take chances. You think you can be Superman. You can do anything you want. The problem we have with youth is that to drive change, you gotta get in the dragon's den, right? So you have to get more young people to be part of the public side, and unfortunately, there's less people. It's cooler to be on a TikTok video and traveling the world and making your videos than to, you know, get into your community and try to make change, right? So to make change, you got to drive it. You got to take the leadership. You got to take the bull by the horns, like they say. And once you do that, then it's like I said, collaborating and trying to work together and trying to set goals that are realistic. You know, like they say SMART goals: specific, measurable, accurate, realistic, and timely. And by doing so, you drive opportunities. Now the question is, you know, you get like I mentioned, AI. It's a fad right now that everybody's just, I want to do AI. But again, you have to pick and choose. Like you look at, in general, if you look at a macro scale, I usually like the 80-20 rule. You know, anytime there's a new technology or any industry that comes in, 80% of it is for the good of humanity, if you want. And then there's always that 20% that, man, what did we do, right? So you look at social media. So North America, like the US, tend to focus on that 80%, innovation, we'll figure out regulation later. And then Europe is the opposite. They tend to focus on the regulation and they kind of step away from the innovation. So you have a point right here where the US has decided that I'm going to drive innovation and Europe is I'm going to drive regulation, and eventually they'll come to a point. So the question is, regions that want to get into this, like we'll stick to that example of AI. Well, if you're in a point where you have low electricity, you know, you don't have necessarily the schooling system to be in, does it make sense to get into AI? Like, unfortunately, geography matters. So being born in an area where the factors don't give you every opportunity, but we're led to believe that everybody can do anything that they want. Well, it's not true. You know, you need, and everything you need money, you need luck, you need, you know, the circumstances, the environment. So each region, I think that's the mistake a lot of people or a lot of politicians do. So youth has to take a bit the longer-term view and say, well, am I working for the next generation? Am I doing something for the next generation? But without obviously taking care of something today, locally, and where we're at. So if you end up doing that, well, yeah, you'll build these partnerships that will foster it. But it's like you can't do it overnight, and that's the problem. Everybody just expects, you know, to be done overnight. And yeah, we're doing this. We're going to get into this industry. But yeah, you can do it. But if you don't have a market, like even I'm from Canada, we're 40 million people. We've created fintechs and incubators, and I'm like, how many of these companies are you going to have? I mean, at one point is that economics matter. So you can't just be burning money. And then at one point is your exit strategy cannot be, I'm going to sell to Google or I'm going to sell to. So it's like you have to build a realistic model. And sometimes it's just being smaller. You know, so you just look at the Uber around the world. There's every Uber and delivery systems everywhere, which is great. You know, like WhatsApp. You go to the Middle East, they got Botim, they got all that stuff. So, and that's what it is. So you can still drive it, but you know, the youth have to get involved. I'm sorry, I was young, I made my mistakes, fell down, got up. You can't just wait and sit back and say, you know, that the older generation or the current generation owes me something. Is that you really have to. If somebody wants to make change, like I said before, we try to find, we said entrepreneurs, but we said crazy entrepreneurs that believe they could change the world. And it's a bit that way. But one factor is, again, more people have to get involved in the public sector. And I'm not saying run for prime minister, or you could just be involved in this, you know, the school board. to drive change, to see certain things, right?
So I would just add, just in terms of like the public-private partnership, I think that in those partnerships, particularly on like the public sector side, like government, truly has to think about like the workforce of the future that they want to start developing within like their landscape, right? And how whoever they are partnering with, they can start cross-pollinating to make sure that like the youth and underserved communities have opportunities to at least be able to dream about what is possible. Because I do think that the gift of youth is that you think that there is nothing that is impossible. And as somebody who, I'm glad you mentioned the Uber example, I helped grow the Uber business in Africa, right? And I also recognize that some of the indigenous companies that came out of that ecosystem in terms of ride sharing are just as competitive in some of those markets. And that's because not only did they take the tech skill set, right, of being able to, from a technical perspective, being able to match a driver with a ride, but they also understood the local landscape. And that will always be your gift in your community, is that you know it better than any outside person, right? But it's a matter of being able to have the skill set, the technical skill set, to be able to capitalize on that. And I think it behooves governments as they think about partnerships of like how they are going to use that. I mean, the Chinese are brilliant at it, right? In terms of when technology comes in, how are they making sure that their own people start to begin to learn some of those skill sets? And again, it doesn't happen overnight. But what I also do fundamentally believe is that young people are also hungry, right? And yes, they do like the TikTok videos and all that, but they also have the opportunity for a lot of communities to like Google and like your mobile phone. And there's an infinite amount of possibilities in terms of learning if governments create the pathways to do that.
I'm just going to add, somebody had told me this once, nothing's impossible, highly improbable, but probability is a statistic, so you get that tail end.
I gotta highlight something. You mentioned that the population in Canada of like
40 million.
The population 40 million, but 50% of them is above.
In the province of Quebec, so there's a bunch of provinces, that region. In 2 years, Quebec is the Japan of Canada, if you want.
Oh, okay.
So there's going to be 50% of the population is going to be over 55 than under 55.
It's important to highlight that in the Middle East in general, and also Iraq and Kurdistan, the population, 60% of the population are under 25 years old. So this question actually is extremely relevant. Like we're talking about like 60% are under 25, not under 30, not under 40, 25 years old. So they're the tech savvy, they're the exposed now, with all the globalization and access to internet and smartphone to what's happening across the globe. My nephew, for example, doesn't think, like how my family, his parents, or my parents think. He thinks like another 20 years old who's like based in Canada or based in Japan because of this I would say connected world that we are at today. So I believe that it's extremely important to address this.
But that's what globalization was built on, right? Is Japan is not having kids. They have an immigration policy that doesn't favor, because they want to keep their culture. That's the decision they made. So every time there's a new U.S. president, one of the first people that go is the Prime Minister of Japan to say, what do we need? Well, the U.S. tells them, well, we want you to patrol the Pacific Ocean, so you're going to have a strong Navy. And they have the second largest Navy. And in counterpart, you can tap into my market. So that's what they do. They build Toyotas. They build they build it over there. So Kurdistan, because of the young generation, if their politicians get to the point where they identify opportunities of countries that have an older population, more experienced as senior managers, but they need work, they need industries, well, it could be a good synergies. But that's very hard to find.
Very good point.
When I came to Kurdistan, I was very impressed by how many local startups you have. And these are companies that cover the same type of services like ride sharing, for example, that in other countries are taken over by Chinese or American companies. So I was like very impressed that you have like this strong local ecosystem. So to answer your question, I want to ask a question to Basima. How, as an entrepreneur, what has been your experience building a company in Kurdistan that is also playing an important role in the way that the government can be involved, if any?
So that was not planned. The interviewer is becoming the interviewee. I think, yeah, it is important, topic to explore. I'm a green tech entrepreneur, but I'm more of, towards my late 30s. So I'm not, at the time when I established my company, there were no, the concept of entrepreneurship did not exist. I did not even plan to become an entrepreneur. It just, things, took place and just happened organically where I had to establish my company. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to, implement my first project for sustainable development. The ecosystem was not there. Nothing was there. I didn't even know that there was a concept or a term that's called entrepreneurship, or I didn't even know that what we are doing is green tech. Like it just as the ecosystem started developing, especially during and post COVID. That's when the topic of entrepreneurship and tech economy and startup ecosystem started circulating within Kurdistan region, and all these startups like myself and other like share ride startups and food delivery startups, they started getting attention because that's what COVID did. They just they changed the COVID changed the economy, and nobody would have utilized these tools without having to be stuck at home and start exploring alternatives to get their needs. So my experience was a bit different than what other entrepreneurs or emerging entrepreneurs experiencing today. I believe the ecosystem is there. It's still developing. It needs more time. But there's a lot of funding from, I would say, PPP-based kind of funding that is being channeled towards supporting the startup ecosystem in terms of growth and financing, capacity development, support and fundraising. My experience is not in any way similar to what is happening today, but I've been also through it all. Since 2021 up until today, we've always been through everything from incubation to acceleration to growth. So I would say, it's been for us is more of like a learning experience, but for emerging entrepreneurs, they have all the resources they need today in our region, and more are being also established. So it should be much better.
I just want to add to that, the technology, the speed of technology that's being developed, that's the big thing that's bringing the barriers to entry down. So as you go, you'll see a lot more smaller companies, a lot more entrepreneurs that are using technology, keeping costs down, and they can have even a small market, and so.
So any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, just one question, a little bit of provocative question, for say, like from some inspiration to know that Kurdistan is one of, again, nation with the youngest population, over 60%, like India. More than 75% of our population is 21 to 28, median range. And so this part of the world is becoming young. But my question to this is, as the younger population in the world, in the emerging economies is rising, are public-private partnerships enough to sustain the sustainable prosperity of these emerging economies?
Well, it depends on which, they're always going to be there. The question is, you're in a capitalist system, so when you have a young demographics is pushing consumption-based economies. That's what drives. If you want to have a high-octane economy, it's spend, 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 spend. Like right now, the next generation is Africa. Africa has been on the later part of the game coming in with medicine, so you still have that high birth rate because a lot of kids would die at birth or right after birth. So a lot of families are having a lot of kids. So then the medicine that's coming in is keeping people alive longer. So you have this, normally you have a pyramid. Now you're getting this chimney. Once you get that chimney, oh man, it's high octane growth. So it's a bit, there are going to be partnerships for sure. It's a question of as you bring in stuff, as you educate more, as you create middle classes, as younger generation delays having families, having kids is expensive. So that extra income that you have, it's going to be disposable income, which will drive the economy. But that can only be done usually once, right? So, and that's what you've seen over the last 75 years, is that obviously the U.S. has the best consumption-based economy. They're bringing immigration. Others are coming in, and that and then you have Japan, which is the if you want the post-aging country of the world where demographics are negative, right? So you have huge amount of older people, but not enough youth, so they have no choice but to dump their excess GDP to the world stage. So there's an opportunity right here for the young generation to be able to build something solid for at least the next generation or two.
So yes, to answer your question, I would say no. And I would say no just because I think things are accelerating so fast. And I also think that, because you mentioned Africa, and that's my jam, I think that the African environment, African youth are not going to wait for African governments. And I think that the speed of which fintech and the ability to move money is happening on the continent, driven largely by youth, will completely change. Like, I don't even think we know what 20 years from now will be in terms of the ability to move money. And I think that in terms of like governments, they can't keep up now. And that's all governments, right? So I think that the future will actually be out the private sector, hopefully in partnership with the nonprofit sector, to really and truly drive the type of change and create the type of world we want to see.
Just like one of the prominent businessman in Iraq was saying, as long as the public sector is not going to interfere in what we're doing, we can do it on our own. That was
just in reflection for the younger leaders, because we just need to be mindful that the mistakes the emerged and I would say the most powerful economies has made in their journey, we should not make those mistakes while we are building our home, So that's what exactly sustainability means about, and this younger generation needs to be accountable for that, because it's just not only you, me, or our coming generation who deserves our land, but future generations deserve that too. So how do we make sure that we are accountable for the future of our land, but not just rampant, closed-eye development, transformation, without looking at the future detrimental impact of this speed of innovation and entrepreneurship and all these cool, exciting, adrenaline-pumping stuff?
I'll just leave you with this if you want for food for thought. And I don't have the answer, but we've gone through all the isms. So capitalism, communism. We need a new ism right now. I don't know what it's going to be, and we're going to find out. And I think it's going to come from Europe, because they have the demographics that are not sustainable. So now you have a problem in Europe where, are you sustaining your culture or are you sustaining your economy, or you're going to try to do both? It's going to be interesting. For example, like U.S., they still have at least a good 30, 40 years before they start questioning it because of immigration. But yeah, that's the next generation is going to create that ism, and I don't know what it is. I have no idea.
I'll just leave one thought: cooperate EU-ism. So that's what we need, the future world. Cooperative-ism. So that's what I'm working on. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I want to close with a very fun example from this week. I mean, I agree with everything that we discussed, but when there was, for like 3-4 days, like the young generations were terrified by the ban of TikTok, and they were all over screaming and crying, and within And within 24 hours, like, the young generations just moved to another platform, right? They don't care what the policy is. They don't care where the money are. They don't care about advertisers. All they care about is creating their own content.
Or they went on a VPN.
in their own terms. And so I think, examples like this will apply across like every sector, and it's going to be fun because policymakers, they either need to embrace this or they will be out of the game.
Thank you for closing this on a positive note. I was a bit worried. I was like, oh, you mean they don't care? No, the point is that younger generation are resilient and they can capitalize on whatever tools and resources are there. And today is the best time where you have access to everything and all the other resources, not to rely on any party or any organization to give you that privilege or that support. Thank you so much for all the panelists today.
Thank you, Basima.
Thank you for sharing your amazing and inspiring experience. And thank you all for joining the conversation as well. And feel free to connect with the panelists after this panel, or online. You can look them up. And I hope to see you again next year.